Math 1314, Tyler Junior College, Section 2.8, Distance, Midpoint, and Circles. Writing the equation of a circle. Okay, so it's not part 2, even though I labeled the previous video part 1. Nah. In the previous video, we discovered the equation of a circle whose center was labeled h comma k and whose radius is r. That equation was x minus h in parentheses squared plus y minus k in parentheses squared equals r squared, remnants of the Pythagorean theorem. In this video, we're going to build a couple of equations of circles. In the first example, what is the equation of a circle whose center is -3 comma 7 and whose radius is 4? This one's pretty straightforward, because if you think of this equation as a recipe, it only requires 2 ingredients, or 3 depending upon your perspective: a center and a radius, or more specifically, the x-coordinate of the center, the y-coordinate of the center, and the radius. And if we can identify all 3 of those pieces, we just put them in the recipe and ding, circle. So let's start with the center. The first coordinate of the center is represented in the equation as h, and the second coordinate of the center, the y-coordinate, is represented as k. Worst h I've ever drawn. Now it looks like an N. Let's try that one more time. There we go. The radius is 4, so here is the r. Now we just have to substitute. I'm going to start writing the equation, but every time I run into an h, k, or r, I'm going to stop. Here we go. Parentheses, x minus, stop. The h is -3, so -3 goes next. Continuing, close parentheses squared, plus y minus, stop. The k goes next. The k is 7. 7 there. Continuing, close parentheses squared equals stop. Next is the r, but the r is 4. And it gets squared. Now, is that where we're going to stop with the answer? No. Because when you build the equation of a circle, there's a couple of things you need to be on the lookout for. Number 1, any double negatives? Yep. So that's one thing we're going to clean up. In the first parentheses, the double negative will make it a plus, so we'll have x plus 3 squared. We don't have that in the second parentheses, so it will stay y minus 7 squared. And the other thing you need to be on the lookout for, and it will always be there, is you just set up the square of a number. You should square it. 4 squared is 16. The equation of our circle is x plus 3 squared plus y minus 7 squared equals 16. You may be asking, do we need to multiply out the parentheses? Do we need to write this twice and FOIL it? Do we need to write this twice and FOIL it? I would not. It's not going to make the problem look any better. I would argue it makes it look worse, because at least here, I still see remnants of the center, and I could recover the radius if I had to. But what about this second example? What is the equation of a circle that has a diameter with endpoints of -3 comma 4 and 3 comma 6? I didn't give you a center or radius. So guess what we're going to have to find? A center and a radius. I think a problem like this, a picture, would really be helpful. -3 comma 4 is about here. So we'll label that -3 comma 4. 3 comma 6 is about here. I could put marks and find them more accurately, but let's just say that's where they are. And we're told that these are the endpoints of a diameter. Remember, in a circle, the diameter goes all the way across. So this is the picture that's being described. But what we need to build our equation is a center and a radius. Let's start with the center. Looks like it might be on the y-axis. How is the center positioned relative to these endpoints of the diameter? Answer, the center is the midpoint of the diameter. So, I don't have the center, but I can find the center. Because in this picture, the center is going to be the midpoint. And we have a formula for finding the midpoint. You average the x's and average the y's. If I average the x's, I'll set up negative 3 plus 3 over 2. And if I average the y's, I'll set up 4 plus 6 over 2. Let's not beat around the bush. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0. 0 divided by 2 is 0. That's the x-coordinate of the center. 4 plus 6 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. That's the y-coordinate of the center. So we now know the center, which is good because we need that. But we still don't know the radius. But by definition, isn't the radius just the distance between the center and any point? So if I found the distance here, I could find the radius. I could have found the radius first before I knew the center, because I could have found the distance across the diameter and cut it in half. But either one will work. So let's find the radius by doing the distance formula on any 2 points that make a radius. Let's use 0, 5 and 3, 6. So under the square root, in the first parentheses, we subtract the x's. Using these 2 points, the second x minus the first x is 3 minus 0. And using the, in the second parentheses, we do second minus first y. So 6 minus 5 goes in the second parentheses. All right, let's see how far we can push this. 3 minus 0 is 3, so that'll get squared. 6 minus 5 is 1, so that will get squared. Let's not dilly-dally here. 3 squared is 9, 1 squared is 1, 9 plus 1 is 10. Oh, look, the radius is the square root of 10. I can't simplify it, and I don't really want to turn it into a decimal. This is a perfectly acceptable radius. But we're not done because we're building the equation of a circle, which requires a center and a radius, both of which we now have. So what's our equation? X minus the x-coordinate of the center, so x minus 0 squared, plus y minus the y-coordinate of the 0, so y minus 5 squared, equals the radius squared, so the square root of 10 squared. Let's clean this up. There are no double negatives on the left. However, I have x minus 0. X minus 0 is just x. And because that will collapse down to a single term, the parentheses on the x are no longer necessary. So x squared plus. For the second parentheses, there's nothing to do there, so leave it alone. Y minus 5 squared. But guess what happens over here? The square root, cancel. Leave me with 10. And there's the equation of our circle. So building the equation of a circle is really pretty straightforward if you have a center and a radius. But sometimes you'll be given other information with which you can find the center and the radius.